Hello, everyone. Once again, this is Greg West with Felons from Felons with a Future for our podcast. No more, Road to Freedom, No More Chains. As you know, what we do here on this interview, we talk with restore citizens who've come home and are now doing positive things in the community, who are also reaching out and helping people, who once were incarcerated and are trying to change their lives. Today, man, it's I get excited about all of them, but today I'm really excited. I really The guy that I had the pleasure of interviewing today was my drug and alcohol counselor when I was incarcerated. For any of y'all who know my story, I always make the joke. I don't know how I was doing outpatient treatment in prison, but that's what it was called. And he was my drug and alcohol counselor, and he really put an imprint in my life that helped me get to the point where I wanted to, really change because I heard his story and I seen where he was at, and it gave me hope. And while I was laying on that rack back then, when I would leave from the recovery service, and I would think about how I could stay from coming back to places like that and help other people, he would always, his inspiration always, played a big part because I seen him go from where he was to running being a part of the recovery services department, and now where he is today. So a little history that I have about him. This is Lamont Sapp. He's like I said, my drug and alcohol counselor. He's a motivational speaker, founder of the Resurrection Project, regional director of from the Ohio Department of Corrections Recovery Service. So no more from me. Let's turn it over to Lamont so you can tell us a little bit about yourself, a little brief background.
All right, all right. Well, good morning, Greg. I'm really happy to be on here with you this morning. I'm really happy about all the work that you're doing. We've been friends on social media for a while, and I've been following you. After you got out and started making yourself visible, I see you doing a lot of great things in the recovery community. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
No problem.
And I see you doing a lot of great things in terms of your own aspirations to continue to build and continue to reach back and help people. And I'm really, really proud of that. Whatever I said or whatever I done, back then, I don't even remember. But I think it's the power of the collective group, and it's the power of myself pouring out into you and into the group what was poured into me. And I think that's how we continue to be blessed. We give away what was freely given up to us. So that's all I've ever tried to do in my career. And yeah, you said it. I'm blessed, and I have a good career path. um, I think I chose that career path because after having messed up and gotten a record, and being incarcerated a couple times, I asked myself, like, what am I going to do now? What's the best thing I can do now? And to tell you the truth, Greg, when I was in prison, um, I became a licensed barber. You know, I got my barber license in London Correctional Institution in 1997. I was very proud of that. It was my institutional hustle as well. So that allowed me to be in a position where I didn't have to say, "Mom," or "Somebody, please send me some money," because if you're a good barber in prison, people take care of you.
Right.
So I was so proud of that. That made me feel good about myself. That made me feel like I have something and I do something. I'm connected to something that's meaningful to other people in the world. So therefore, that kind of fed into my self-esteem. And I didn't see myself doing anything other than that. Okay, anything. I was on the trajectory where I seen myself having my own barbershop one day. And Greg, I got to tell you, um, if things, let me just put it like this: things didn't happen the way I planned them. When I
Right.
got out of prison, I think the most important thing I probably need to say today is that when I got out of prison, like, I've been in prison twice. 92, 93, Lancaster, um, 98 through I'm sorry, 99 through, um, what year did I get out? I got out in 99. I'm a little mixed up on my years. 94 through 99. Okay, I got out the halfway house in 99. And I'll tell you, while I was in prison, after all that I seen, after all that I went through, after all the years of not being around my family for Christmas and my birthday and all the holidays and not seeing my children and their mother getting married while I was incarcerated. I mean, after all that, I thought to myself, surely I'll never turn back to the lifestyle that led me to that demise. Okay. So I know that for myself and for many others that sit in a place like that, it's like I'll never do it again. That's the thought. And that was me. And so I thought I was good to go on this trajectory of being a barber and having my own barber shop. But what happened was is when I got out of prison, I fell. I fell back into the lifestyle. I wasn't really in the lifestyle, but I fell back into using. Okay. Because I wasn't living the lifestyle, but I wasn't engaged in those things that I needed to be engaged in to keep me on track. Okay.
Right.
And so then, we have that saying in recovery: one is too many, 1,000 is never enough. So getting out of prison, I wish I could tell you that I rode away on a tall white horse into the sunset of recovery, but I didn't. When I got out of prison, because I had a mindset of I'm only going to meetings and stuff like that because my PO is letting me. Because see, I was under the old law. I was serving the 8 to 15 under the old law, and after about 4 years, 4.5 years, my judge let me out under what they call super shock probation. Okay, and so um, I get out. I'm on probation. Again, I'm going to meetings only because my PO says I need to go. As for me, I know I don't want to go through what I used to go through. So there I was, not fully engaged in recovery. I had a sponsor, and I would say to my sponsor, "Hey, how you doing? You all right?" He said, "Yeah, you all right? Yeah, I'm all right. All right." And that was the relationship. I mean, we went to a few meetings, but I wasn't engaged in recovery. So I had my ups and downs coming out of prison. And it wasn't until after my last time of going to jail and all that, and then going into the Salvation Army, a 6-month program, it wasn't until then that I had the vital spiritual awakenings that I needed to have. And then my life, I never looked back. So even though I went to prison back in 1994 and didn't get out until 98, my sobriety date is November 22nd of 99, coming up on 21 years this month.
That's right. That's right. You know, like I remember, like my story is similar to yours. When I came home in 2010, I didn't just jump straight into getting my life, putting my thing back together because I was still holding on to, the thought that I could still, as long as I didn't use nothing, as long as, what I'm saying, I stayed, from putting anything in me, I could go back to the lifestyle. And, one of my biggest downfalls that I had was while I was running around teaching all those classes for you guys in the recovery services. I was holding on to that reservation. I didn't ever tell nobody at the time, except for the guy Marvin who was taking me through the steps in the penitentiary, that before I got locked up, I put some dope up. I knew I was coming home to get back into the lifestyle. So like one of the questions I always like to ask is, how did you feel coming home and realizing that you really had, after bumping your head a couple times from like what you just told me and like what I had to go through, how the feelings of that you had to go through of realizing you really couldn't mess with your old buddies and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, even when I came home and I had my difficulties, I didn't go back to the old buddies because I'll tell you where I was at by the time I went to prison. Without trying to glorify the lifestyle of the drug and criminal lifestyle, I'll tell you, Greg, that I lived the highs of being in the lifestyle. Okay,
Right.
because I sold drugs from the time I was 13 years old. Started off getting nickel bags, breaking them down, selling joints in the seventh grade. Okay,
Right. Right.
so from there, I moved into, if you want to call it, the fruits of being in the streets. Okay, I lived that, but then I also lived the lows of it. Okay, and
Right.
so by the time I went to prison, I was the guy that, like, when the money was gone and everybody else was like digging in their pockets and kind of feeling around on the floor for something, I was the guy that was out the door and I was on the move and I was a straight up menace to society, and you just didn't want to be, you didn't want to see me, you didn't want to be dealing with me. So I really didn't have friends, I really didn't have, I didn't have that. Anybody that I was associated with before I went to prison, they were not, nothing against them, but those connections were not worthy of me. They were not worthy of revisiting.
Right. I remember one time we were when I was going through the CBT class that you facilitated before I start, before you entrusted me to start facilitating it myself in there.
Sure.
We were listing out some of the assets and things like that because I still had big layer of denial on me. It took me back to relapsing. You know what I'm saying, to start breaking down that denial. And I was listing some of the stuff that I had, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember that he said, "Well, unless you start working on thinking effort, all that ain't gonna do nothing but become cop money." You know what I'm saying? And I mean, for real, Sap, when I went back to the lifestyle, and I would be in the spot sometimes, and that would resonate with me, man. We never know
Mhm.
what a person would say that's going, touch them. But I remember going through a lot of that time, man, when I was struggling from when I went back to the lifestyle. I got home March 2010 and started back doing what I was doing by April. And
Mhm.
I mean, and I remember just some of the things that we talked about. And like one thing that really stood out for me was that, I will always remember that you were working. I think at that time you were working on your master's degree when I was there, because I remember I think you had your bachelor's. And I remember you having, I think you were working on your master's when I was in there. I don't know, but I know you were still in school. So,
Okay.
describe some of the processes that you had to go through pursuing your career and your education. That we have to break down those mindsets that we can't do this, and we have to
Okay.
you as an
Yeah, that's
example that we
that's
can.
that's a good question. Let me just take you very briefly back to high school when I was smoking weed and drinking every day. When the football coach and the basketball coach kind of gave up on me by the time I was in the 10th grade, because before that, I was a guy that played sports every day. Even when it wasn't in season, me and my dudes played in the streets. We went over to other neighborhoods and played football against other neighborhoods and all that. And then I transitioned into being the guy that when I got my first car at about 16 or 17, I'm no longer on the court. I'm no longer able to do what I need to do in school. I'm no longer able to play official sports and stuff like that because everybody knows I'm in the streets. And so I tell you, I don't know how I graduated high school, Greg. I graduated on time in 1983. I was 17 or 18 years old. And I tell you, man, I just barely passed classes because I ain't never been one to take no books home. I ain't never been one to study or nothing. I would just be like, okay, it is what it is. Let me go in here in the science class and take this test. So fast forward into wanting to do something else in my career. Again, being in barber school, that motivated me. That made me feel like I was somebody in life. And then after I graduated from barber school, I went into college while I was still in prison. See, my process, even though I fell down after I got out of prison, my process of rebuilding a new life started while I was still in prison. So I went to school for business administration for a little over a year. And I just happened to get out of prison early. So that's what stopped that process. Now, to tell you the truth, I never knew that I had the ability to study and learn and achieve and write papers and do all that. I never knew I had that ability. I never applied myself before then. See, there, you know how we say sometime in recovery and the promises of AA, we say you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. And so I was amazed because I never knew I had that ability. And so when being a barber, it was working out well because I was a good barber even in the community. But when I fell down and I started using again, I found myself going to treatment, going to jail, all this other stuff I had to go through. When I came out of that, somebody asked me to come and work with them with teenage kids. And I never, mind you, in prison, I never said, I want to come back and work in the prison. I want to be an important person in the prison. I never said that. I had no thoughts about the prison. When I leave the prison, I don't ever want to see the prison again.
Right.
Okay? I also never said I wanted to become a counselor. Okay. I was not in prison thinking I want to be a counselor. I want to teach other people how to get their lives together. That was not a thought. So after having relapsed and went to jail and did all that stuff after getting out of prison, there was a friend of mine that I was in treatment with, and he says to me, he says, "Hey man, why don't you come over here and work with me with these teenage kids?" And the funny thing about that is the treatment center that I was in with him, they also had the treatment center with the teenage kids. But while I was in treatment with him, I got kicked out of treatment right in the middle of group. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because of that, my PO locked me up for 7 months. And because of that, I had the vital spiritual experiences that I needed to have while I was in the county jail, having 12-step meetings in the county jail, having Bible studies in the county jail, working the steps with the chaplain of the county jail who used to come and get me out of my cell and take me into his office and go through this 12 steps out of a recovery Bible. Now, fast forward into you say, what was my process? So I get out of the Salvation Army and I'm working with these teenage kids. And so I never thought about going back to school to get a license and become a counselor. I had a mentor step into my life and say, "Well, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "Well, I'm cutting hair on the side. I'm driving the truck for the Salvation Army, and I'm working with these teenage kids. I mean, what else should I be doing?" So he talked me into going back to school. So I pursued an associate's degree. Okay. And the associate's degree was in mental health, chemical dependency. And at the time, they called it mental retardation. Today, we call it developmental disabilities. But the funny thing was, Greg, is that all the college work I did in college, in prison, it paid off for me. You know, when they looked at my transcripts at Columbus State Community College, they did not say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't accept these. These are from Urbana University from the prison. We can't accept these." So what happened was, is all of those classes I did before I left London, they paid off for me, and it allowed me to get my associate's degree a little bit faster. Okay, and so from there, I worked in the field as a counselor I worked as a counselor assistant for the House of Hope for Alcoholics. Before I left there, I was the resident manager. I left there and became an outpatient counselor for a couple years. And as an outpatient counselor, I worked with people I had people that came through that treatment center that were people I ran the streets with, people I was in jail with, and all that. Every time I turned around, I had to say to my clinical supervisor, "Hey, Pookie or Ray Ray, uh, they can't be on my caseload because we yeah, we chopped it up together back in the day." But then one day I had a client that said to my supervisor, "You know what? I am so inspired by seeing what Mr. Sapp did with his life that I think for me to be in his group and on his caseload is going to hold me to what I need to do with my life." And so that really touched me. Okay. But fast forward from there, I got a job with the state of Ohio working in the therapeutic community at Pickaway Correctional Institution. I worked in the TC for about 19 months. And then I took a promotion and moved over from the same prison, working in the therapeutic community, and I switched to the treatment modality that's focused on the disease model of addiction under the heading of recovery services. And so I took that job, and after I started doing that, that's where I met you as I worked there as an
Yeah.
outpatient counselor. Like you said, how is this outpatient counseling when I'm still up here in this prison?
Right.
Um, so during that time, I went back to school to pursue my bachelor's degree. Me and a cohort of people, we went to Wilberforce University. We participated in what you call the Climb program, and so we got our bachelor's degree in about a year and a half. Okay, and from there, I realized that, when I first started working in the field of counseling, I realized that, like I told you, there's not a great deal of money in the field of counseling. There's probably more satisfaction for helping people than there is money. But at the same time, if you go to the top of the field, you'll probably, reap more monetary benefits. And I said to my mom when I made the decision, see, first of all, when I made the decision to go into the field, the decision was like at some point I had to see if the Ohio Chemical Dependencies Professionals Board would allow me to pursue a license. And once I understood that they would allow me to pursue a license, I told my mother, I said, you know what? The only way this makes sense to me, this was back in 2000, 2001. I said, the only way this makes sense to me is if I take this all away and become a clinical supervisor and whatever job or whatever opportunities that opens up for me. So then me and one of my partners, we went to school at Tiffin University. We used to make the drive every Saturday, and we would leave at 7 in the morning and wouldn't get back till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. It was a Saturday program all day. We had 3 classes every Saturday, and that took a couple years and yeah, some money. It's definitely some student loan debt, but you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it because I told you earlier, I never knew that I had the capacity to learn and achieve on the level that God has allowed me to do that on because I just never knew because I was caught up in the small world of the drug and criminal lifestyle.
Right.
So, my education has opened up many doors. And not just because of the letters behind my name, but because of my ability to learn, to comprehend, to create, to build.
And like it was important. I think one of the things that helped me gravitate towards you, because like when I was there at Pickaway, when I had to come back to the main compound after I did that knucklehead, whatever it was, when I was in the honor camp, and that was one of the best things that happened for me, I believe. And I had to come back to the main compound, and I was a student, but everybody thought I was class to recovery services because I spent so much time in there. And underneath the tutelage of you, Brother Prince, and Mr. Henderson, like I said, it was a good core of people there. I was able to, start really doing some examination about where I was at. And like one of the things that would always resonate is, like these myths that we hear about returning, the myths about being returning citizens. And like what was one of the common myths that you heard of being, as they called us back then, ex-offenders that you had to contend with when you
Oh man,
and overcome?
man, so many myths, and maybe these myths are perpetuated from something connected to reality. But to me, living the life that I'm living, those are myths. I mean, there are people who think, I can't vote. There's people who think you can't get student loans, you can't get grants.
And
Like, I
right,
mean,
that voting thing, that voting thing. You're looking at somebody who ran for public office with felonies.
yes, yes. And I was so proud of you in doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, there's just so many things that, I think truly, um, what do we call them? Um, the collateral consequences. Okay.
Right.
the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, which is where I do my work for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. I'm proud that the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections has realized that there are a lot of collateral consequences that are placed upon someone with a record. And, within the last few years, they've moved to work with different state agencies and other entities to help try to remove some of these collateral consequences. And what collateral consequences means is just by nature that you have a record, there would be a lot of things that you would be restricted on, or a lot of hoops that you would have to jump through. And they realized that those things were prohibiting people from being successful. And so I'm so proud of them for working to try to remove some of those things. But I'll tell you, truly, initially the system was designed that you would not only have the pay the price, the penalty of being incarcerated at this time, but you would also, for the rest of your life, have those collateral consequences attached to your name and that number. Okay.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is that we need to wake up and understand that there's so much more. There's so much more
Right.
because for me, you know, growing up in the streets of Youngstown, I was truly in those streets, okay? And I did not, you know, I was a felon without a future. I like that. I like that your program is, felons with a, future. But I was a felon without a future. I was definitely moving in the wrong direction. I was going down a dead end street. And but I want to say today that there are so many people who think that they're so restricted. So because of being so restricted, they go back to what they know. They go
Right.
back to the familiar thing. And so, I guess if I was to sum up the answer to your question is that you're not as restricted as you might think.
And that's important, man, because you like I had, because like even though prior to me coming to prison, I had already had a conviction on my record, back in '97, my first drug case, and as it would the powers that be, it's like he ain't ready for prison, you know what I'm saying? And I thought it was because I was nickel slick and I had money, that those things we tell ourselves because my lawyer told me do this, do that, and get it reduced, and you'll just get probation. So my mind said it was the money who did it. It wasn't nothing about the powers that be or the guy understanding that knew it wasn't time. And so like I had to get with like I say coming home when I was finally sent to CRC. I thought it was over. You know what I'm saying? Because I was those self defeating thoughts that I had. Like most of my friends, I was 35 when I came in. I'm like, wow. Most of my friends had already been back and forth to prison. Now they done settled into their lives, and even though they might still be in a lifestyle, they weren't doing it like because by that time I developed the mindset that I was untouchable because I was just a long history of drug activity. And I didn't think I was like everybody else. Here it is, convicted for getting a half a kilo in the mail, man. Drug addicts. The myth that I had was drug addicts don't mess with nothing that big. I'm all right. So like it was me having to break down that mindset, and I thank you for what you put into me in those CBT classes for people who don't know what that is. That's cognitive behavior therapy. And I remember sitting in those classes and it would challenge me. That's how come the core of what we do with Felons with a Future is work on the thinking, the trauma, and the healing element.
Amen.
People can come home and understand that, they can do some things, which brings me up to like how I talk so much about how you made an impact in my life. And I know there's somebody special in your life. I've heard you talk about it. But one of the questions I always like to ask is like, who were like three of the, one, two, or three of the most important people that helped you turn your life around when you came home and got serious about, trying to change?
Okay. I can say I'm gonna first of all say my sponsor that I had for many years, that I picked. I started working with him when I was still in the Salvation Army, and this is a man that truly put me on a spiritual path. This is a man that truly showed me the importance of walking upright, the importance of respecting people, the importance of how you carry yourself. Okay, so he was a truly godly man, and he really, he took me in like a family member. He was like another father to me. Okay, so he had a major impact on my life. And again, notice that I said he was my sponsor. So that's a key element for those of us that choose to engage in the process of recovery. Okay.
Right.
Um, Another person is, believe it or not, Greg, and I know you believe it because you witnessed it. I
Okay.
brought him into the prison to speak at graduations and things like that. But a judge, the
Yeah.
judge just sentenced me to 8 to 15 years. And
Yeah.
you better believe that when he sentenced me to 8 to 15 years, he meant it. Okay. Not only did he mean it, he felt it because he was probably like disgusted with me and what I had done. And so when he sentenced me 8 to 15 years, I never said to myself, I never looked at him and said, you know what? That man, he and I, we're going to be friends one day. I never said that. I said to myself, I said, the jury sold me out because there wasn't nobody on the jury that looked like me. I said, my court appointed attorney sold me out. I think I had my baby's mama tied up in there somehow. Somehow she took some kind of responsibility, you know, um, and it was everybody but me. But this person, okay, later on in life, while I was incarcerated, after I couldn't file for early release until I had 4.5 years in. And so, because I was serving time on multiple cases, and so when I sent in for my early release, I think I paid somebody 3 packs of cigarettes to do my paperwork. Okay, that was the economy back then.
Yeah.
In
Yeah. Yeah.
1998, 3 packs of squares was big time, right? And so I paid the guy to do my paperwork. And in my paperwork, in my packet sent to the court was my barber license, my transcripts from college, and all the other programs that I had participated in. And so this judge, later on in life when me and him would become friends and we would do speaking engagements together, he would jokingly say, there's a couple things that happened in court. He would he would look out into the courtroom the morning he had me sitting in back of the chambers waiting to come out, and he would say, "Well, who the hell do we have back there today? There's a whole lot of people in the courtroom, and there's a lot of media in the courtroom." And so he forgot that he and the prosecutor agreed to bring me back, for an early release hearing, right? Well, not so much the prosecutor because she was kind of against it, but him and his staff thought that my case looked good. Okay. So he said, all right, well, put him in the afternoon because I want to clear some of these cases out of my courtroom. So he brings me out, and now he's remembering that I'm the guy that he told to the victims. He said, this guy will serve every bit of that 8 to 15 years. And it was close to Christmas time when he sentenced me, and he told them, this is your Christmas present from me to you. And so he really, really meant that. But this judge, being a judge, he's deceased. He died a little over a year ago.
Right.
But him being a judge that believed in second chances because he himself, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying this, he himself has had his own challenges and his own second chances. And he's also a godly man. And so this judge, in spite of what he said in that day in that courtroom, when he brought me back in front of him, this judge granted me an early release. And he said right there in the courtroom, he said, this man has turned his life around and I'm going to let him go. You know, and Greg, I didn't know that the media was in the courtroom at that time. And they showed that on the news later on that night. And I was in my jail cell with, the guys I'm in there with. And they told me, they said, bro, look, you about to be on TV. Can you believe it? And so after the commercial, they went back to the courtroom scene. And when he said that, everybody in my jail cell, I think the slow clap wasn't even, I think that was like the very first slow clap that I ever seen, right? It was unbelievable. And so later on, again, I wish I could say that from the moment he said that, I rode out of the courthouse on a tall white horse into the sunset of recovery, but I had my challenges, okay? But by the time I got my life on track, now keep in mind when he let me out early, I never said, "Oh, this guy is so great. He let me out early. Let me see if I can go cut his grass or trim his hedges or something for him." No, I wasn't thinking about that dude, right? And so it wasn't until later on in life that once I got myself together and was truly and immersed in the recovery community and speaking at meetings and things like that, that we ran into each other. And he was so proud of where my life had come to. And then later on, when I started working in the prisons, that's when I started bringing him in to speak to other people in the prisons. And, this was a man with a lot of humility. I went to, we spoke together at meetings, but there was a meeting that was close to him because he was one of the judges that operated the community based correctional facility in Columbus.
Right.
And so I went in there with him to a AA meeting. And so at this time, he's got all these guys in there that's on his caseload and they are in the meeting, sidebar conversations, walking around, talking, doing all kind of stuff. And I'm looking at them like, dude, what are y'all doing, man? This is your judge. Why y'all? And you know what? He was not, what impressed me was during those times, he did not carry himself in the capacity of a judge. He was like, I'm here just like everybody else. I'm in recovery. I'm here for a meeting. And he was not bothered by any of that, you know? And he taught me about humility and patience and things like that and how to treat people. And so he made a major impact on my life, because through God touched him, and he said, in spite of everything, I'm still going to make this decision to let this man go. And early on, it was a disappointment because I didn't have a foothold on recovery. I didn't think I needed recovery, Greg.
Right.
And we know that the first step is admitting,
Right.
and if we don't admit, like that's like saying, you know what, I got an illness, but I'm not going to admit it. I'm not going to
Right.
admit it. So I can't move on and get the healing that I need if I don't admit it. And so that's what it took for me, was to realize that, I have to live a certain lifestyle in order for me to be good all the way
Mm. Like some of the things that that adjustment, man. I mean, and the people that we're reaching, the segment of the population that we're trying to reach out to and service. I we've been there. We've been there, and like that's why I enjoy doing this to hopefully give them hope, let them know that what I'm saying, there's going to be some adjustments that you're going to have to go through. From that time, like I say, I'm like you. I didn't come home even with all the information I had, even with the step work that I had underneath my arm and all the people that what I'm saying I was sponsoring in there and all that. I was still holding on to that mindset that I could come home and still sell drugs and run in the streets and stuff like that. And so I had to find out that there was an adjustment once I decided that that wasn't what I want to do. Because like my turning point was when not the relapse, and because something about if you still getting money, you'll lie to yourself easier.
around.
I got caught up in that second raid in less than 4 months at the same spot that I got caught the first time, and I was saying I could do it different. I'm just dropping off packages now. I'm not sitting in there grinding, and task force come and get coming around the corner when I'm leaving, and I had to really reach back to some of those lessons that we went through in the CBT. So like what I'm getting at is like what were some of the hardest adjustments to society that you had to go through when you were after being released? Not so much being released, but when you decided that the lifestyle was no longer the thing, because the for me, the adjustment was up in here.
Hmm.
The struggle was real up in here. So what were like some of the adjustments that you had deal with, because I know the other people like, oh, these two, they sitting there, they success, they ain't going through what we, yes, we are. We went through,
Yeah, man.
they
Yeah.
need to hear, they need,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'll tell you some of the big adjustment was that it's like I can't think that I can't think that I'm gonna have the fruits of a good life or of a spiritual life or of a recovery lifestyle and still live the other life.
right,
You see, it's like I can't have my toe in the drug and criminal lifestyle, or even not even, let's not even say the drug or criminal lifestyle. Let's say I can't have my foot still in some skullduggery or still in some larceny. You see what I'm saying? But then over here have this fruitful and peaceful life. Okay. It just doesn't happen that way. I have to be all the way either like with the drug and criminal lifestyle. If I got a toe in, I'm all the way in because see, it says in the word, sin will overtake you. Okay, so if I got even the toe in, I'm all the way in. That's just like you. You say, well, I'm just dropping off packs, or you could have just been on the corner doing lookouts, and guess what? Oh, grab him too. Right? You can't just have a toe in and be like, I ain't really in, right?
right, right, right,
And so over here on the other side, I need to be all the way in. You see what I'm saying? And so for me being all the way in, man, you know what that meant for me? That meant, dude, ain't no more hustling, ain't no more easy money. So I can remember that I think I mentioned it briefly earlier. Man, there was a time when, my first job working in this field of recovery back in 2001 when I got hired working with the teenage kids. This is what the guy said to me. He said, you know what? I usually start people off at $7 an hour, but there's something about you. I'm gonna start you at 750. Now, Greg, being that I was already sold out on the fact that this is the life that I gotta live, I was working at Wendy's for like 650. Okay, because I was, while I was in the Salvation Army, I started working at Wendy's before I left there, and so when he said, not at 7, but 750, I was like, that's right, there's something special about me, and so I now, not that I thought 750 was big, but just because he told me I was different. So
right,
I was
right,
like, for
right.
the 750. I was also um, I was also still driving the truck for the Salvation Army part time. I let go of the Wendy's job, but then I'm working at the treatment center. I'm driving the truck for Salvation Army part time, and because I'm a licensed barber, guess what I'm doing on the side? I'm going to people's house cutting hair, man. I'm the busiest dude you know. And so, it took understanding that there is no easy way. See, but I also understood that this is the good way because I'm not in trouble.
Right,
I ain't got
right.
no beef with nobody. I ain't got no court. I ain't got no papers coming in the mail saying you are hereby ordered to appear.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And that busy part, right? What you're talking about, man. That I hear a lot of. I don't hear it so much now, but early on when I came home and I got into the recovery process, when I got into the recovery and stayed, and let me put it like that, in 2011, when I was like, okay, enough. I had 67 days on the streets, and like one thing I know, you ain't gonna get away. Okay, good, you done surrender to the lifestyle and all that, but the state of Ohio, you owe you owe something to them, and they wasn't playing. So when I got sentenced to do that 6 months in that CBT, correctional based correctional center down here, when I came home, like I said, I had 67 days. So when I got out, I almost had 9 months, and I got busy. I mean, really staying. And I heard a lot of in my early process, you're gonna burn yourself out. But they didn't understand the way I hustled on the
That's
street.
right.
I
That's right.
needed something to do. I stayed involved with a I was working. I was doing my meetings. I was trying to, anything that was positive. And I come to find out that was one of the biggest things that I had to do to adjust, man. So when you were talking about being busy, it's important for us to help them, returning citizens to realize that if you got too much time on your hands, you might mess around and be back hanging out with Ray Ray and Pookie, So,
Yeah,
I stay
yeah.
real busy, and like a couple more questions before we wrap up. Like, what do you wish you had known when you first came home that you know now? You know what I'm saying?
When I first came home, well, again, I think if I would have known that just having done the time and had the consequences, I wish I would have knew that that wasn't enough
Right,
to motivate me, because we say in recovery we have a quick forgetter, you know, and it's like you know how many times I done seen people that did more time than me, I mean, I might have did by the time I left the halfway house, I might have did 5 years, but I know people that has done a lot more time than that, and they have forgotten that the stove is hot. Don't put your hand on the hot stove; it's gonna burn you. Okay, and so I wish at that time I would have knew that not only do I not put my hand back on the stove, but see, what I know now is that because of the life that I live, because of what I'm made up of, because of how my life and my way of thinking and my way of behaving was altered. See, for example, I can't stand still, Greg. See, this is part of what the hustle is about. I can't stand still and be complacent or just think that as long as I stay out of the way, I'm okay. See, the
right,
life that I want to have is that way, okay. And at no time can I be standing still. I need to be moving in that direction, because if I don't, the tides, the water is going to move me back in the other direction.
yeah.
You see, if I'm not moving forward, I'm moving backward. And if I would
Yeah.
have knew that, then that would have been helpful.
Okay. And like being on both sides of the criminal justice system, being in front of the judge now, being one of the ones who help people, to understand that, you have to work on your thinking and also giving them hope, being on, what are some of the things, if the one thing, because there's probably plenty that you see from being also inside of the system now. If there was one thing that you could change about the criminal justice system right now, what would that be?
Hmm. There was one thing I could change about the criminal justice system, that people who work in the criminal justice system and those of us that are caught up in the criminal justice system, I think people need to understand that people have the ability to change. I think people need to understand that sometimes there are people who come into the criminal justice system and for whatever reason, maybe they can't go home, or maybe they can't go home for a while. But the majority of people that come into the criminal justice system are sick people who need to get well. And so it's a hospital at the highest level of care. And so that we need to understand that for some people, this is their intervention, this is their hospital, this is their pit stop of life. So treat them as individuals that have the potential to get well and maybe be something else in their life, or maybe be something that they used to be in their life. Okay, because you never know when that person is going to be your neighbor, or that
Right.
person might even be your boss.
Right.
So, yes.
That's a good point because from my experience, and that's one of what some of the other grassroots organizations that I work with, you know, in the reentry field and everything. It's like we talk about that a lot about the lack of humanity. People get this idea that once you're a convicted felon, once you know what I'm saying, even after you've served your time and you might be on, when that comes up, we'll hear this a lot of times. Well, you don't seem like the person that was ever in trouble because you know me now. But then when that comes up, your mindset changes about this. So, like one of the things that we're working on is trying to change not just the stigma for the returning citizen, but for society also. Let them know that we're still human. We made some
Right.
choices that might not have been always the best. And then there's some people who got swept up, coming out of the crack era. There was a lot of us who got caught up in that
That's right.
if they had the humanity like they have now with this epidemic, a lot of us would never had felonies and everything. We would have got the treatment. So that's
That's right.
big things that we're trying to really work on as far as criminal justice reform is reminding people that we are still human. You know, we've made some decisions, we made some mistakes. Some of us, or whether society wants to believe it or not, there are some innocent people in jail. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I ain't saying all of us, because I know I committed every crime I did, but we have to get that mindset to understanding that we still are human beings, and yeah, and like you said, there is a possibility of change for anybody.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
I was working with the returning citizens help change your thinking, though.
How's working with returning citizens
Right.
change my thinking? Can you repeat that?
Right. Like, because I know you have your recovery houses, and a lot
Mhm.
of people that you deal with, or some of them are not just alcoholics and addicts, but some of them have had a criminal history. So how is working with these restored and returning citizens help change your thinking?
Okay, well, first let me just make one declaration that I don't take anybody that is coming straight out of prison or
Right.
anybody that's still on supervision because it's a conflict of interest for me.
That's
But
right.
yes, I do often have people who have a history of having been incarcerated that come into the transitional house, and some of them are people who have gotten out prison and again have made some wrong turns, and so they find themselves still in need of some structure, some support and some things like that. But I happen to know, not just from the transitional house, but from my some of the people, some of my colleagues, and some of the people that I've collaborated with in the community with the nonprofit. There are a lot of people that are in the professional world that have been incarcerated before. And there are people that are very successful, that are living very fulfilling lives. And they are people that if you didn't know them and if they didn't tell you, you wouldn't even know that they had been incarcerated. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Man, it's been, man, like I said, this one right here, this interview is really, really special to me. All of them are special because we're giving hope. But I mean, this one has been real special, and I thank you for taking the time, sitting down with us today. And like the same way you say you've been following me, I still follow you too.
All right. All right.
Everybody, even though we might not speak a lot, you're still considered to me my mentor. Because
Thank you, Greg.
I watch I watched you going through what you were going through when I was incarcerated. The dedication to keep on going to school. When I heard pieces of your story about, what I'm saying, changing from that criminal lifestyle into, and that what gave me the hope. So, man, this has really been really, really inspirational for me because it's not often I get to, what I'm saying, sit down with the guy who really inspired me, whether you know it or not, to go,
Well, I appreciate that. I
yeah,
do appreciate that. I appreciate you having me on. And what this reminds me of is and I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal or call myself your hero, but it just reminds me of when they say sometimes be mindful of when you meet your hero, right? And it's like this person that from afar you've admired and you've been just waiting for the moment to just like meet them in person and all that. And so, you know, I'm just grateful that I am still on the path and still on the trajectory that maybe when you looked at me back then, when you sat in groups and I kind of fostered your learning and your training to help others. Okay. And so maybe you looked at me in a certain way, like, oh, Mr. Sapp or whatever. And so I'm glad that I have not that I'm on a pedestal, but I'm glad that I have not fallen from this place of how you seen me then. You know,
Right.
God has kept me on the track of still being able to help others. You know, I'm doing a lot of great things today in ministry. You know, I'm a minister in training at my church. I'm a deacon at my church. I teach Sunday school once a month. I teach Bible study about once a month. I have a recovery ministry on Monday nights called Steps to Serenity. We do that on Zoom. And again, you know, for anybody that wants to be connected to me, you know, I have a Facebook page, which is called the Resurrection Project, Addiction, Incarceration, and Change, because I want people to know that people who were caught up in the lifestyle do have the ability to change, much like yourself, Greg.
I appreciate it. And I will put in the description of when I air this, your Facebook page for anybody who would like to get in touch with you or know more about your program and everything like that. Because I know that you're doing real good things on that end, you know, helping people with checkered past and, you know, what drugs and alcohol is also the lifestyle, you know. And I just want to say, keep up the good work, man. And again, we thank you for Felons with a Future and also our podcast, you know, Road to Freedom, No More Chains. We thank you.
Thank you, Greg. You keep up the good work as well, my brother. God bless you.
You too, man. Much love.
Same here.
All right.